Music theory with OneNote. Modal chords built from notes outside the 7-note collection. In other words, from our Earth analogy, building chords off of notes that are anchored in the 5 oceans. Ocean chords. This time focusing specifically on the Mixolydian Ocean, the Dorian Ocean, the Aeolian Ocean from a Nashville number perspective, that being 5.5, 2.5, 6.5 Nashville number nodal points. So get ready and some coffee because although we're just playing with one note, it's a beautiful note. You are not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of Modal Node System, MNS, Presentation 1369, OneNote modal chords built from notes outside the collection, X plus, D plus, A plus. List of presentations, at least in this view, are on the right-hand side. Also noting in this OneNote presentation, we'll spend all of our time on the music theory side of things, but we have another similarly numbered and named presentation, or set of presentations, I should say, where we actually build these tables out in Excel, practicing not only our music skills, but our Excel formatting skills as well for formatting's sake. Let's give a quick reminder of our overall objective in our project, that being focusing in on chords, thinking of ways to be able to write chords so others can see them and read chords that is functionally as efficient and easy as possible, while also keeping in mind the traditional views for chords. Let's think about some of our problems on the fretboard here, where we have the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, represented on top. We're looking at the collection of notes around the key of C, C major collection of notes, meaning C is the Ionian in this case. Now, when we build our chords, normally the chord name is being constructed by the note name. So if I built a chord off of this note, which is a C, we would call it a C-type chord. If I built something off of this A, it'd be an A-type chord. Typically in the collection of notes around the key of C, this A chord would be a minor chord. However, that doesn't really translate to all 12 collections of 7 notes, resulting in people getting stuck in one collection of notes because they memorized everything from the perspective of the note points instead of a relative perspective, which they can easily copy and paste. In other words, if I label this not as a C major chord, but as an Ionian chord, and this not as an A minor chord, but as an Aeolian chord, then I can move these two up and the same shape will be applicable to all 12 collections of notes. That's great. That's basically what's being done in a Nashville number system when we name the chords by note. But sometimes when we look at the perspective of a different tonic, meaning instead of the one being the Ionian chord or the Ionian song is in a major scale, if we switch like to an Aeolian, then we make that the one sometimes. The argument here being, don't do that. Keep that as the 6, and then you can just name all of your chords off of those modal points. That's the general idea. But we run into some functional problems with that, which is the same things we run into with normal chord construction. That being, what about the 5 notes that are what we're calling ocean notes? They're not on what we're calling the continents, the 7 notes being our continents, that being the collection of notes, but they're in the ocean. If I build a chord off of this ocean note, typically what we would do is say, okay, I'm going to call that, in this case, an A sharp, and then name the type of chord, a major chord or a minor chord. However, that doesn't give me the context of the song, and if I have a lot of chords that are built off of the ocean notes, it becomes muddy to understand what the composer was thinking in their mind in terms of what key the song was in. It would be more specific to write down, hey, look, I'm looking at this perspective from the collection of notes around the key of C. Possibly I'm in an A minor, so the A is going to be the tonic. You could then call the collection of notes the A minor collection of notes, but I think it would be easier to name the collection of notes off of the majors because then you only have 12 of them, and then say that the tonic is going to be the 6, which happens to be an A in this case. And that means if I'm building something off of what I would call the Aeolian Ocean or a 6.5 chord, then I can simply name it a 6.5, Nashville number 6.5 chord, and then name the shape, which I could call a major or minor shape. But more specifically, if they're more complex chords, we can call it an Ionian, a Dorian, a Phrygian, right, a Mixolydian type of chord. And then we have basically all of the flavors that are normally in a normal chord construction that we could just build off of the ocean notes as well, giving not only the shape to us, but keeping in our mind the same collection of notes, defining to ourselves as we're thinking, as well as to the reader, which might be us in the future or somebody else, what is in my head in terms of how I'm visualizing the composition of the song. What is the major notes or flavors or theme or colors that are actually in the theme of the song, and which of those are outside of the theme of the song. That's how most of the time we're approaching things. It would be better if we wrote down our information so that it reflected that, so we didn't have to guess what collection of notes we were in, so we didn't have to guess what the tonic is, so we don't get confused by those notes that are outside the collection. They should be clearly labeled as, in essence, ocean notes, because that will give us the context of what they're being used for. All right, so we looked at our normal kind of collection of notes here. And again, this is just kind of a list of the collection of notes that you would build off of the nodes, all of the 7 nodes. And the point here is that you don't really know which node you would be building these notes off of. In other words, everything that's in the majors here would be, of course, Ionian, you would expect. I would build those off of the Ionian node. However, we also know that the majors could be built off of the Mixolydian, at least for a 3-note Mixolydian and a 3-note Lydian. The minors, you would expect all of the minors here would be the minor chords for the Aeolian. You build them off of the Aeolian node, but that's not exactly true because you need an extension when you add the 13. And then you've got this dominant 7 column, which is like, why did that show up? Because they made up a whole nother column just to deal with the Mixolydian that has a flat 7, even though it's a major mode. And then you've got these half diminished and diminished. You might as well call them Locrian modes, right? And then you've got the extensions that are going to have to be added, which is kind of weird because you would think you wouldn't need extensions if you're building chords off of the notes that are in the 7-note collection. So whether you use this system or it's still kind of messy is basically the point. No matter what you do, if you add the ocean notes, it gets messy. And that's going to be the idea. Okay, in a prior presentation, what we did is we mapped out our collection of notes here. We then listed the relative position based on the key of C, which can then be applied to all other notes. The reason we work in the key of C is because it's the default, because the way they set things up, it doesn't have any sharps and flats. From an accounting standpoint, that gives us a nice double check to make sure that we have the right collection of notes. So we take the whole step 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7. That gives us what I'm going to call a permanent, what I'm calling Nashville number permanent set of notes, which I'm not going to renumber as we think about the tonic shifting around through any of these perspective of notes. I'm just going to say, look, the 4 is the tonic. Same collection of notes, it's still the 4. That's just the tonic now. That's how I want to think about it. And then we have our abbreviated letters here for Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Now, what about the ocean notes? That's what we're focused on this time. There's 5 ocean notes. This is the Ionian node. I would call it, from a Nashville number standpoint, 1.5, or the Ionian ocean, or I+. This is the Dorian. If we go one step up, we go into the Dorian ocean, which I would call Nashville number 2.5, Dorian plus, or D+. We have Nashville number 3 is the Phrygian. We don't have a Phrygian ocean because the 2 continents happen to be locked together when you go from Phrygian 3 to 4 to Lydian. 4 is Lydian. So then we go to 4.5, we land in the ocean, which is going to be Lydian ocean, Lydian plus, or Y plus. And then we're on Nashville number 5, Mixolydian, which is going to be an X for us. One step up lands us in the Mixolydian ocean. Nashville number 5.5, Mixolydian plus, X plus. Then we get to the Aeolian. And then if we go one step up, we get to the 6.5, or Aeolian ocean, A plus. And then we get to the Locrian, and that takes us half step back home. Okay, so that's going to be the idea. Now we built out our normal chords. Now, even if you think of the chords in this normal naming convention, naming it by the letter rather than by the node that you are in, it's still useful to list out this information by nodal point, meaning this is the set of notes or names that you would come to if you build the chord off of the Ionian node, which in this case happens to be the collection of notes around the key of C, but would be the same for all 12 collections of notes. You would just have to then change that first letter. But if you don't do it that way, you just say it's going to be an Ionian chord, then I don't need to name the letter. I'm just going to tell you I'm in the collection of notes that's related to the C major or G major or whatever. And the Ionian node then is completely transferable. The chord is transferable as well. So these naming conventions are going to be more clean. To do that, they're actually more transferable. They make your songwriting more efficient if you write it that way, because then you can easily transpose them and even rotate them possibly through different modal perspectives. If you're in the Lydian, this is the list of chords that we're going to be building off of. If you're on the Mixolydian node, these are the list of chords that you typically would make that would be in the collection of notes. If you're in the Aeolian, this would be the list of chords. Dorian, list of chords. Phrygian, list of chords. Locrian, list of chords, right? But I'd rather just build it off of the nodal point. Then it's straightforward, because you can just say I'm either building a 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 note chord off of that nodal point. And how do you build a chord? You just take every other scale degree, or you take every other modal half step. So it's easy to do that way. You don't need to get into any kind of messiness. Now we said, okay, that works great, but what if we're in the Ionian Ocean? So if we're in the Ionian Ocean, last time we built this out and said, on my fretboard over here, if I'm in the Ionian Ocean, then I'm right here. And I said, okay, well, I can just name that and say, look, that's the I plus node. That's the Ionian plus, or the Ionian Ocean, or 1.5 node. And then I'm just going to tell you the shape of the chord, which will be major or minor, or more specifically, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, and so on and so forth, which will be easy for me to map out once I list that. So we went from the Ionian, we went to the Lydian, same thing. So it would be a 4+ chord. So Nashville Numbers has a restriction right now because nobody talks about the ocean notes, right? They just say, I'm going to build a chord. It's the 1 chord, it's the 5 chord, it's the 3 chord. And if I'm in the key of A minor, some people will rename the system. Don't do that, right? Just say, now I'm just going to say the 6 is the tonic, as though I'm playing in a major key, but the tonic is now the 6, and then I have all the chords that are all the same for the same collection of notes. But nobody's really saying, why don't I name the ocean chords relative to the notes that I'm in, right? So if I'm on the Lydian, it would be a 4.5 Nashville number chord. That doesn't tell you the shape though, right? It's a 4.5 major chord, right? It's a 4.5 minor chord, or it's a 4.5 Ionian or Aeolian, or if you want to get more detailed, to a Dorian, a Mixolydian, and so on and so forth. That gives you all of the flavors that you can build from the 5 ocean notes. So now we're just going to continue that idea, going to the Mixolydian will be the next one. So if I'm on the Mixolydian, what would be the best way to name or tell someone, if you were being as efficient as possible, to say I'm playing something in the key of Mixolydian, and then I'm going to add notes that are outside the collection. So I would say we would write it down like you would in sheet music in some cases, right? Because they have the sharps and flats. I'd say the collection of notes is the collection of notes around C major, meaning I'm going to name the collection of notes from the major perspective. You would apply the formula to the major note. That only gives you 12 collections of notes. You could name it by saying, I'm looking at the G Mixolydian set of notes. That's fine too, but it means that your naming convention means that you have a bunch of different names for the same collection of notes, right? It's more efficient to say, I'm only going to tell you there's 12 crayon boxes, which I'm going to name from the major flavor, and then I'm going to tell you that the tonic is the Mixolydian, right? So I'm in the collection of notes around C major, but the tonic is going to be the Mixolydian. If I know that, then I can use the Nashville numbers just the way they are from the major perspective. The 5 is going to be the Mixolydian chord, which is going to be a major chord, but it has a minor 7 to it, right? And then if I play a song that's in the ocean, let's say it's in this note, so it's going to be a G sharp in this case, what I would call the Mixolydian ocean, or X plus, or it's going to be 5.5. That's the 5.5 note. Two ways I can perceive that chord. One, I can say, well, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to name it. I have to change my whole perspective on what I'm playing here and move everything up like this, right? I can move everything up and say I shifted up all of the notes. Well, in this example, I shifted them all the way up to D, right? But now I can see the Mixolydian is up here. The whole shape moved up. So so one way I can do it is I could shift this whole thing up just so I can build the chord off of this node. Now, if I was writing the music and I was actually thinking in my mind that I am now in a new collection of notes, from this point forward in the song that I'm writing from the perspective of a different collection of notes, the collection of notes around the C sharp, that would be fine. I'd like to indicate that in the song. Say, now, look, my mind has shifted. I'm up here now. And now I'm going to build off of that. But that's not what typically happens. Usually I'm going to be playing this note that's outside. Therefore, I don't want to rename the collection of notes. I want to tell the reader specifically, this note is outside what I'm viewing the song in, calling it something like a 5.5, a Mixolydian ocean chord, and then name the chord type, major, minor, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be our practice that will continue on here. So if I go back on over, we left off here, and let me see if I can break this out. I'm gonna make this smaller and then bring it over here so we can see everything at the same time. Okay, so now we're gonna look at Mixolydian. So I'm on the Mixolydian plus node, meaning Mixolydian ocean, X plus, that's gonna be Nashville number 5.5. We're gonna build a chord off of it. What chords could we build? Well, I'm going to build the most complex type of chords, making them all 7-note chords. We could, of course, build a 3-note chord, a 4-note chord, a 5-note chord, a 6 or 7. 3 would be the most common triad chord, but 7 is the most complicated, so I want to do the most complicated, and then you can back it down to the easier ones. So if we had a 7-note Mixolydian ocean or 5.5 Nashville number chord, then we could give it the shape of a major, or in other words, Ionian Nashville number 1. So what would that be? It would be a G sharp or A flat major 13 chord from a normal kind of chord naming perspective. But if I name it this way, then it doesn't tell me that it's an ocean chord. This would basically force me to rethink the shape of the guitar, pulling me out of the shape that I'm viewing the context of the song in. Right, and so this one, I could say it's a 7-note Mixolydian ocean or 5.5 Nashville number 2 type of chord, meaning it's a Dorian chord, has a Dorian shape to it. So that's going to be more specific. It's a minor shape, but if I'm adding the 13, which is equivalent to the 6, the Dorian has a major, whereas normal minors don't. So that would be more specific. If you wanted to pull that in, that would be equivalent to a G sharp or A flat minor 13 chord. What if we had a 7-note Mixolydian ocean? So same ocean note, we're anchored in the ocean on Mixolydian plus or the 5.5 modal point, but now I want to build a Phrygian shaped chord, which is a minor shaped chord, but it has the second, which has a minor second to it, which is equivalent to the 9, the 9, right? So then what if I build the next one? It would be a Lydian, so it'd be a 7-note Nashville number 5.5 or Mixolydian ocean, but it has a Lydian shape or Nashville number 4 shape to it, meaning it's going to have a major shape, but now it has an augmented 4th or augmented 11th, which could be called a G sharp A minor major 13 sharp 11 or something like that, right? I could say it's going to be a 7-note Mixolydian ocean or 5.5 Nashville number, and it's going to have a Mixolydian shape, which will have the same as the major shape if it was a 3-note triad. But once you add the 7, you have a different naming convention, which would be G sharp or A flat 13, which indicates that it has a 10-note away 7th. You could have a 7-note off of the Mixolydian ocean or X plus node or 5.5 Nashville number chord, which has an Aeolian shape, which is like a minor shape, right? Because Aeolian's the minor. That would be a G sharp or A flat minor flat 13, because if you add the 13, the minor actually requires an extension. And then you could have a 7-note Mixolydian ocean or X plus, which would be Nashville number 5.5, and then it has a Nashville number 7 or Locrian shape to it, which would be a G sharp or A flat diminished chord. All right. Okay, so now this naming convention is the easiest way for us to functionally build the chord, because then I can see the shape. I know the shape already, but I don't have to reconstruct the shape that I'm in to build the chord shape, right? I know that I'm on an ocean chord and I can build a major shape or a minor shape or whatever. But if I actually name the nodal points, that's when it gets messy, right? So in other words, if I was to go over here and say, all right, let's take a look at this, and we have the Lydian. I didn't add the next bit here, but if we were to say, what are we on now? We're on the Mixolydian. I would be comparing the Mixolydian point. I would be shifting this down to the Mixolydian ocean, which is going to be 5.5. 5.5 would line up to that number 1. And so if I think about it, then I'm going to say, okay, let's just take the pointer and let's say we're on the Mixolydian ocean here. And if I was to go up to the second modal half step or third scale degree, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be this one, right? And then if I was to go up to the 7th, it would be 4, 5, 6, 7. So you would think we would have 5.5, 1, and then 2.5. Let's see if that's what we have over here. We've got that's not the one. 5.5, 1, 2.5, right? So that looks like it's doing what we would be expecting it to do. So these points then are where it gets a little bit messy. We don't really need them in practice because we would know the shape. But if you want to mount them out in a DAW or something like that, it would be important. And it's also useful to actually memorize the points for these ocean nodes. More useful because it actually will be the same for all 12 collections of 7 notes. Whereas if you memorize, once again, the note here, the note name, then the notes that will be involved for all different 12 collections will be different. That's why you'd rather memorize the relative position. So let's just compare this out like we've seen before. Like this is the major chord. I'll try to make it into a box again. Oh, now it made it a circle. I wanted to make it a box. Let's undo that. Whatever, we'll keep it there. And then we're going to say down here, this is going to be the major for the Lydian and the Mixolydian. So does this make sense? We can say, there's the box. Yeah. All right, I drew it nicely that time. It did it. So if I say it's 0 modal half step or the first scale degree, they're the same. That makes sense. The second modal half step or third scale degree would be 4 notes up. So this should be a distance of 4 from the relative perspective. Remembering, however, that there's going up in half steps, meaning by 0.5s, but there's no distance between the 3 and the 4, right? Because that's where the half step, no distance between the 7 back to the 1. So in any case, we have the same here. That should be 4 notes up because we're in a major mode. And then we've got the 4th modal half step, 5th scale degree, which would be 7 notes up. That's the same for all of the major modes because the only one that's different would be the Locrian here. You would expect because it has the flat 5th. We have the 6th modal half step, 7th scale degree, where we have a difference in here, which is the Mixolydian, because it has a 10 note or minor distance for the 6th modal half step or 7th scale degree instead of the major distance. And then we have the 8th modal half step, 9th scale degree, which they are all the same because they all have a local distance of a 2 note away major second. We have the 10 modal half step, 11th scale degree, where we have a difference on the Lydian, because that's where it has the local distance of an augmented 4th, which is that crazy 6 note distance instead of the 5 note distance, which everyone else has, even the Locrian. And then we've got the 12th modal half step or 13th scale degree, which is the same. They all have the major distance of 9 notes away from a local distance. All right, so then if we look at the minors, here's the minor points, and we can just say, okay, are they the same? Does this make sense? We can say there's that, and then here's the minors up top. Here's the minors up top, and say, okay, it's got this 0 modal half step 1st scale degree, which are the same. 2nd modal half step 3rd scale degree, that should be 3 notes up now instead of 4 notes up. And so it's different than the majors, but they're all the same. That makes sense, at least. We have the 4th modal half step 5th scale degree, which should be 7 notes away. That's the same for all of them, except the Dorian. That makes sense. We have the 6th modal half step 7th scale degree, which is going to be a 10 note away distance for the minors, whereas 2 out of the 3 majors have an 11 note away distance. So that looks correct. We have an 8th modal half step or 9th scale degree, which is going to be different on the Phrygian, because the Phrygian has a local distance of a minor second, 1 note away minor second. And then we have the 10th modal half step, 11th scale degree, which is going to be the same on all of them because they have the same perfect 4th or perfect 11th, which has a local distance of 5 notes away. And then the 12th modal half step, 13th scale degree, which has a difference on the Dorian, because it has a major 9 note away distance for the major 6 for the local distance versus the 8 note away minor distance. And then if I look down here comparing the Dorian to the Locrian to the Aeolian, then we have the same bits here, but you have then the flat 5 for the Locrian, and you have the distance for the 8 modal half step 9th scale degree, which matches the Phrygian distance. Boom, but it's different than all the rest of them. All right, so then that gives us that, and we can say that these would be the modal points. Now, you can take these end points and still call it a modal range chord, but you can't really number it up the same way because you can't count every other note. In other words, the pros and cons of this is that it keeps us in context with the song when we name it this way, but I can't really count up the modal perspectives as easily. In other words, if I use the normal scale degree, what would I do? I would make this the 1, and so I would make this G sharp or A flat the 1, which means I'm changing my perspective, changing the shape that I'm looking at, and then I could just say it's going to be the 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on and so forth from a scale degree standpoint. The way to get around that normally, so I don't have to renumber the system, is to say, no, I'm going to keep them as the relative Nashville number perspectives. So if I was on an actual ocean note like a Dorian, I'm going to keep it as the 2 and measure up from that point, not make the 2 the 1, just so I can then apply the numbering, because again, that changes the perspective that I'm viewing the fretboard in. But I can't do that if I'm I'm anchored on an ocean note. So I can't really just count in terms of scale degrees or modal half steps from the ocean note. That's why we have to use actual half steps, but from the perspective of the mode that we're in, taking into consideration the half steps. So that's where it gets kind of wonky. But once you memorize them, then you can actually memorize the nodal points. And the nodal points would be the same. Normally, you probably memorize them for the triad, and maybe the 7, would be the way to start that out. And you can say, look, if I'm in the ocean, Mixolydian ocean, and I'm playing a major chord off of the Mixolydian ocean, it's going to have Mixolydian ocean, Ionian, Dorian ocean, and just a normal Mixolydian non-ocean nodes that I'll be holding down which will have the shape of a major shape, but I'm building off of the nodes from the perspective of the point that I'm at. We've got the note half steps, which would be the same from the point that we are on. We've got the intervals, which are, and the modal half steps, which mainly are going to tell you the half steps. And then we've got the notes, and then these are the buckets, same buckets that we looked at before. All right, let's go on to the next one and say, well, what if we're going to build off of the Aeolian node? So Aeolian node would be A plus, Aeolian Ocean, or node 6.5. So if I was down here in my list of chords, what I'm doing is I'm noodling around. Maybe I'm in the key of C major, or maybe I'm in the key of A minor or something like that. And I want to play this note right there. I want to build a chord off of it. But I don't want to rename the whole system so that I can name that chord. I want to name it a Nashville number. So I'm going to name it an Aeolian Ocean chord, or a 6.5 chord. So, and then if I name it a 6.5 chord, I need to give it a shape. So I could call it a 6.5 major shape chord, right? Or 6.5 minor shape chord. Or more specifically, a 6.5 Ionian, because the Ionian will tell you specifically what kind of major it is. And that would normally be, that would be an A minor, an A sharp or B flat major 13 chord that's built off of the 5.5 or Aeolian Ocean note. You could have a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or 6.5 Nashville number, and then Nashville number Dorian or 2 chord, meaning I'm going to build a minor type of chord, but maybe it has a major 13 in the construction. It has a Dorian shape. So then you can be more specific, and that would be an A sharp or B flat minor 13. If you were to name it by the note name, you could say it's going to be a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or 6.5 Nashville number chord, which has a Phrygian shape to it, or Nashville number 3 shape to it. And that would be equivalent to an A sharp or B flat minor flat 13 flat 9 chord if you were to name it off of the note point. You could say that you're going to be building a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or 6.5 Nashville number with a Lydian shape or Nashville number 4 shape to it. That would be equivalent to an A sharp or B flat major 13 augmented 11 chord, sharp 11. So then we could say that we're going to build a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or Nashville number 6.5 with a Mixolydian shape or Nashville number 5 shape to it. That would be equivalent to an A sharp or B flat 13 chord. We could build a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or Nashville number 6.5 Aeolian shape or Nashville number 6 shape chord. That would be equivalent to an A sharp or a B flat minor flat 13 chord. We could build a 7 note Aeolian Ocean or Nashville number 6.5 with a Locrian shape or Nashville number 7 shape chord, which would be equivalent to a A sharp or B flat diminished 13 chord. I think I've got an extra letter in there that's bothering me, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I don't think that D should be, anyway. So that's going to be the general idea. Now, if I was to look at the nodal points here, then I could say, okay, we're going to build it off of the 6.5. So let's go back on over here and say, let's erase this bit. Erase that. The eraser sometimes is sticky. Come on, it doesn't want to erase everything. Dude. All right. The point is that we're going to be building off of this one now. So we're going to build off of that one. And then we're going to say that we're going to go 1, 2, 3 up instead of 4 up. So that would be the third, you would think. So I go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you would think that would be the fifth, right? So we're going to be 6.5, 1.5, and 4, right? So let's go over here and say, we got 6.5, 2, and 4. Well, wait, I just did the minor shape because I was building off of the Aeolian plus node. The minor shape would be 6.5, 1.5, and 4. The major shape, that would make sense, would be 6.5 to 2 and then to 4. Okay, I think that makes sense. All right, so then let's compare the major bit once again to the major bit so we can kind of check them out. The major bit is Lydian. So we'll do this a little bit more quickly. What would we expect to see here? The same starting point, the same second modal half step or third, the same fourth modal half step or fifth. Wait a sec, I'm missing one. This one here. But we have a difference in the sixth modal half step, seventh scale degree because the Mixolydian shaped chord has a 10 note away distance for the sixth modal half step or seventh scale degree. We've got the same eighth modal half step or ninth, same 10th modal half step, 11th, except that you have a difference here, which is the Lydian, because it has that augmented fourth or augmented 11th, same 12th modal half step or 13th scale degree for the majors. Let's undo that, undo, and look at the minors. So the minors are going to be the Aeolian here. This is the Aeolian. And then we've got the minor are these two, Dorian and the Phrygian. Dorian, the Phrygian. So that's Dorian shape, Phrygian shape, Aeolian shape. So you've got the same zero modal half step or tonic or first scale degree. You got the same second modal half step or third scale degree, which should be now 3 notes up instead of 4. We've got the fourth modal half step or fifth scale degree, which is the same, sixth modal half step or seventh scale degree, which is the same for all of them. That's great. Eighth modal half step or ninth scale degree, which is going to be different in the Dorian because it has a 9 note away major distance there instead of the normal 8 note away distance. Then we got the 10th modal half step or 11th scale degree, which is the same, 12th modal half step, 13th scale degree, where we have a distance in the Phrygian because we have a different local distance of a minor second instead of a major second. So let's undo those. And then if I was comparing the Aeolian to the crazy Locrian, which is kind of minorish, these two, Aeolian to the Locrian shape, then we have a difference on the Locrian having the flat fourth modal half step or fifth scale degree, and it has a difference in the eighth modal half step or ninth scale degree because it has that same thing that the Phrygian had, the weirdness there. Let's undo, 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 undo. See if I can undo all these whilst I'm at it. Oh, now I went too far. You've gone too far. You have gone too far this time. That's okay. I can go back. All right. So here's the modal points then. So we can name those points as Aeolian Ocean. So this major would be Aeolian Ocean, Dorian, Lydian. That would be the triad. The triad to make this one, which would be the Dorian shape, Aeolian Ocean, Ionian Ocean, and Lydian. Right? That would give you the shape, which would be the Dorian shape, minor shape. And then here we have the half steps, the interval distances, and so on. And let's do the last one. We're on the what if I was on the Dorian Ocean chord? So Dorian Ocean chord. So that's going to be nodal point 2.5. And we can call that D+. So if I'm on my fretboard here, it's like, okay, I'm playing around the notes that are the collection of notes around the key of C, but and here's the Dorian, but I want to play this chord, which is in the Dorian Ocean. Why might I do that? Well, maybe I want to lead into this E right there and make it like a suspense thing to lead into that one. So maybe I play a diminished chord right there. Or maybe I'm in the E and that's like a minor mode. So maybe I want to go from this minor shape and then I make another minor shape here and then another minor shape here as I walk up in half steps or something like that. When I make the 3 minor shapes, if I'm thinking of myself in the key of the Phrygian or the key of E Phrygian, then I don't want to rename it to make this the 1 so I can make a D minor chord. No, I can just say, well, that's a D Dorian chord. It's going to be a minor shape. And then when I go here, I don't want to rename the shape, so I can make a D sharp, minor chord. I don't need to rename it. I'm just going to say, no, that's the 2.5 or the Dorian Ocean chord, which I'm going to make a minor shape on, which I could just call an Aeolian shape if I want to name them by the modal shapes. And then I'm going to move up here to what I would call a Phrygian shape chord, a 3-note Phrygian shape chord. There, right? That would be contextually giving you way more information than to say this is going to be a minor chord that's going to go to a minor chord that's going to go to a minor chord, right? If I said this is like, if I told you, look, we're moving from a minor chord that's going to have this, and this, and then we're going to move up to the next chord the next chord is going to have this, and then this, and then the next chord we're going to move up, and it's going to have, let's say that's going to have this, and then this, right? Those are the three chords, the red dots, right? That's what a normal naming convention says. We're doing a D minor, and then we're going to do a D sharp or E flat minor, and then we're going to do an E minor. It doesn't give you any context, right? It doesn't tell you, like, contextually what has happened. Wouldn't it be nicer to say, look, we're making a 2 chord, Nashville number 2, or Dorian chord. Then we're going to make a Nashville number 2.5 minor shaped or Aeolian shaped chord, or you could say Dorian shaped chord if you want, but it's a 3-note chord, so it's be a minor shaped chord or Aeolian shaped chord. And then we're going to go up and we're going to be here on the Phrygian node, and it's going to be Nashville number 3 Phrygian shaped chord, right? A 3-note Phrygian shaped chord. That gives you way more context, and you know that given the context of the song that we wrote down saying we're in the collection of notes around the key of C, and we have the tonic being the Phrygian node, which happens to be in this case an E. That gives you all the context, so you're not guessing like what we're doing now is kind of guessing what we're doing, right? You shouldn't have to guess. It should be written in the system, which kind of is in sheet music with the sharps and the flat kind of thing. But we lose it when we write like tablature, and we lose it when we are in the DAW system. They're not giving us that context. It would be okay. So in any case, if we're in the Dorian node, you could make it's going to be a 7-note Dorian Ocean or 2.5 Nashville number chord, and maybe it has an Ionian shape or Nashville number 1 shape. That would be a D sharp or E flat major 13 chord. You might have a 7-note, and again, you could have a 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, but the 7 would be the most complicated. Maybe it's a 7-note Dorian Ocean or Nashville number 2.5 chord, and it has a Dorian shape, which would be a minor shape, but more complicated than that if you're going to add the intervals that are going to include specifically the 13, which is equivalent to the 6, because it has a major distance there if you're in the Dorian shaped chord. So that would normally be a D sharp or E flat minor 13 if you were going to name it by the note name instead of the relative position name. You could have a 7-note Dorian Ocean D plus or Nashville number 2.5, which has a Phrygian shape or Nashville number 2 shaped chord. That would be a D sharp or E flat minor flat 13 flat 9 chord, which is quite ugly, even if you named it by the note name. You could have a 7-note D plus chord or Dorian Ocean chord or Nashville number 2.5 chord, which has a Lydian shape, or in other words, a Nashville number 4 shape to it, which would be a D sharp or E flat major 13 augmented or sharp 11 chord. You could have a 7-note Nashville number 2.5 or Dorian Ocean chord, D plus chord, which has a Mixolydian shape to it, or Nashville number 5 shape to it. That would be equivalent to a D sharp or E flat 13 chord. You could have a 7-note Dorian Ocean chord or Nashville number 2.5 chord, which has an Aeolian shape, which is basically a minor shape if you would prefer to say minor shape instead. But that minor shape, if you have a 7-note chord, means that you're going to have a flat 13 to it from a normal naming convention perspective. Then you have a 7-note Dorian Ocean D plus chord or Nashville number 2.5 chord, which has a Locrian shape to it, otherwise known as a Nashville number 7 shape to it, which would be a D sharp or E flat, and I think it should just be a diminished 13 chord. All right. I think that extra D shouldn't be there, in other words, I think. But so now we're going to be measuring from the 2.5. So if I go back on over here and say, all right, well, what if I measure, let's choose a different color. I have a different color. Let's choose this one and say we're on 2.5. So we're back up to 2.5. That's going to be like our starting point. And if I was to make an Ionian shape or major shape to get to the third, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4 notes up. So that would be here. And then to get to the 7, if it's an Ionian shaped chord, 4, 5, 6, 7 would be here. So you would expect then it would be a root of a 2.5 and then a 5 and then a 6.5 are the nodes. In other words, Dorian Ocean to 5, which is Mixolydian, to a 6.5, which is the Aeolian Ocean. So let's go ahead and see if that, so 2.5, 5, and okay. So we have 2.5, 5, and 6.5. That makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and check these out. So this would be the major. So that's the Ionian, and then the other two majors are here. So ba-boom, do-do. So we have the same 0 modal half step, first scale degree, same second modal half step, third scale degree, because those are all major distances. Then we have a fourth modal half step, fifth scale degree, which are all the same, that's 7 notes away. Sixth modal half step, seventh scale degree, where we have that difference in the Mixolydian because it has a minor 10 note away distance instead of the major 11 note away distance there. We've got the 8th modal half step, 9th scale degree, the same, 10th modal half step, 11th scale degree, where we have a difference in the Lydian because it has a local distance of an augmented 4th or augmented 11th, same 12th modal half step or 13th scale degree. So let's undo those, And on the minor, here's the Aeolian. These are the minor nodal points. And that's going to be the minor nodal points up here. All right, so we have the same 0 modal half step, first scale degree, second modal half step, third scale degree, which is now a 3 note away minor distance, same 4th modal half step, 5th scale degree, 7 note away distance. We have the same 6th modal half step, 7th scale degree, and we have the same 8th modal half step, 9th scale degree, except here on the Phrygian, because it has a local distance of a 1 note away minor second. We have the same 10th modal half step, 11th scale degree, because we all have the same local distance of the 5 note away distance. 12th modal half step, 13th scale degree has a difference here on the Dorian because it has a major distance there, which on the local distance would be a 9 note away instead of an 8 note away distance for the 6th, which is, okay, so undo, and then we have the Aeolian. Oh, I crossed it out instead of circle it. Compared to the Locrian shape. So we have a difference in, once again, the Locrian flat 5 distance is different, and it has a difference in the 8th modal half step, 9th scale degree, because that's the same as the Phrygian issue. One step away for instead of 2 for the first modal half step or second scale degree. Here's the modal points. So again, if we built off of the Dorian Ocean and we built an Ionian chord, the shape would give us the points that we would be holding down, which would be Dorian, Mixolydian, Aeolian. In practice, what you would probably do to figure this out is you're like, okay, I'm building something off of the Dorian Ocean here. So let's say I'm on this Dorian Ocean, and then if I'm building like a normal major shape to it, if I'm on the third string down, that major shape that we're going to be making is going to be like a D major shape. So we would have then something like this, right? It would be like boom, and then we're going to go, the fifth would be boom, and then boom, right? And then I could say, well, what are the nodal points there? Well, I'm in the 2.5 or the Dorian Ocean, I'm in the Aeolian Ocean, and then I've got the Mixolydian node, right? So, and then if I wanted to convert the shape to something else, then I can convert it to something else, right? So here I'm in the Dorian, I've got the Dorian, I've got the Mixolydian, and I've got the Aeolian Ocean. See, so you can kind of figure out what the actual points are. And again, that's actually useful, not just if you were mapping out in a DAW, but because if you did memorize those points, they're the same for all 12 collections of 7 notes, which it's not the same if you memorize the note names, which again is what locks people in to only being able to play from one collection of notes. So we have the same other stuff over here. So those are good. So that's the general idea. We only have those 5 notes that are outside the collection. Common argument against using a Nashville number system. It's not sophisticated because you're only playing out of a 7-note collection. You don't have any name for the chords that are outside that 7-note collection. If you name the chords 1 through 7, well, no, you can clearly come up with a naming convention and just call it a 5.5. That gives you more context because it tells you contextually about the notes that are outside the collection, and then you could just give it the shape, which could be major or minor, but more specifically, all of the flavors of the shapes are there if you simply name the shape by the modal shapes. Okay.